You know, our gathering today is being titled Creative Discipleship in the Light of COVID-19. I'm glad you've chosen to participate in this webinar, and it's good to welcome people back from our first gathering and good to welcome some new faces as well. Really glad that you've joined us to share in this conversation about how we might best minister within the rural context. What good news stories can we share together? What ideas and missions do you have or do others have that you might be able to see and use from this context? We really hope that these webinars provide opportunity to listen to experienced practitioners, but importantly, a place to share together. So it is, of course, good to welcome all participants today, but let me introduce to you some folk in the room who are responsible for this event. We welcome Andrew Webb and Lorraine Brown as facilitators, Elizabeth Clark, the connectional lead on rural ministry. We're glad that Tom Donaghue and Kate Burnett have come to share some of their experience of rural ministry. And for those who don't know me, I'm Carla, part of the Learning Network in the Yorkshire Plus region, and have colleagues here, Rachel and Graham, part of the same team. Let me hand over to the Reverend Andrew Webb, who's going to lead us in our opening devotions.
Good afternoon. I'm Andrew Webb. I'm the rural lead for the Yorkshire West district. One of the joys of living in Skipton, which is where I live, is the beautiful countryside that's all around me. I regularly drive between Skipton and Grassington and enjoy amazing views of the Yorkshire Dales. And I think some pictures are going to come up on the screen. Thank you. If you've ever driven the road between Skipton and Grassington, you might have looked up and seen the Rilston Cross, which for over 130 years has been a local landmark high on the hill. So as I lead us in an opening prayer, I thought we'd have some images of that cross to focus on. And the prayer that I'm going to use comes from Martin Atkins. So we pray. God does not always lead by the shortest route, because some things are best learned on longer journeys. God sometimes leads us into the wilderness, as well as by still waters, because some destinations are reached with scars as well as smiles. God urges us to travel light, but also to take things of our precious past with us, because some things remind us where we've come from and bring hope of a future. God guides in different ways, sometimes half hidden as in a grey cloud, sometimes blazingly clear, because God's people are called to travel as God guides them. And there is never a time when God's guidance fails or ceases. As Jesus said, I am with you always. Amen. So I'm pleased to be able to introduce our first speaker for this afternoon, Tom Donaghue. Tom is an evangelist based at Cliff College. He helps both the college to engage in mission and evangelism, and with the college helps the local church engage in mission and evangelism. He leads the Cliff Year, which is a gap programme for 18 to 25-year-olds with a focus on community, mission, evangelism and vocation. Tom is also a member of the Methodist Evangelism and Growth Team, with a particular focus in the work for young evangelists and also young leaders. So I'm going to hand over now to Tom.
Good afternoon, everyone. Really good to be with you all again. I enjoyed being here last time as a participant, and particularly the time we spent in our groups sharing with one another. So I look forward to doing that again today. I've been living in North Derbyshire, Peak District, very near to Cliff College for just over 2 years. yeah, a new way of life for me. I'm really enjoying being part of rural living and rural ministry, and having previously been based in East London, Essex area. So yeah, big change, but it's been very exciting and a good time to really settle into rural life over lockdown. I also want to just highlight my colleague Sophie's here. She's on the One programme. She's based at Cliff College as a local mission enabler, and she was very much involved as well in our project, our service of a drive-through communion, a drive-in communion. So you might have heard of something similar before as a drive-in cinema, but this is a little bit different. And I'm just going to show a short video that just gives you a taste of what that was like. So there's a bit of an insight as to how we spent our last Sunday in September. It was a collaboration between Cliff College and the Peak Circuit. From the college, it involves some staff and our residential students, as well as Peak Circuit ministers and lay people. We ran 3 services during the day. There was a total of around 65 cars that came on site that day, with most cars having more than one person, and I'd say it was around 20 plus in average that joined us at each service in terms of cars, which is quite a different way of counting church attendance. And I've got a little PowerPoint to show you just to help guide me through that talk. So this is me coming into the 1 o'clock service, and welcomed nicely by the steward. And then on the way in, you drove past different stations on the way. So it wasn't quite like McDonald's, but it certainly had that feel. We were welcomed, and you got to place an order and a drink for a snack that would come after the service. And we're also provided with a bag. So yeah, unlike McDonald's, there was no burger and fries in there, but inside was our order of service, our communion, which provided us with wine and wafer and some other literature about Peak Circuit and Cliff College, which meant that we were able to do this in a very COVID secure way. And it's a real blessing and opportunity to be a part and attending with so many other people. Cliff College, we're in a fortunate position of having space and the grounds in order to welcome this many cars. And also you can see the stage there with the band. I think to highlight that we're very fortunate we could have a smaller stage than if someone else was thinking of doing this, as the bands were all made up of our residential student body who are acting as one household, so social distancing didn't matter so much for them. In order to make it work so that everybody could hear, we hired a radio license, and I will be able to share a link with you as to how you do that. It's become ever popular drive-in services, so Ofcom have a specific link to help churches navigate this, and also community groups who've done things like drive-in cinema. But yeah, to think of doing something like this, there's an initial application fee of £400, and then the license fees depend on whether you're going to use FM or AM, and the type of power you'd be using. So we had FM at a power level of up to 1 watts, which meant the license fee was £35 for the day. That was the length of our licence. And we also hired the radio equipment, so that was about £300, but with the engineer and transport costs added, about £700, including VAT. And I was wondering as I sat there, oh, is there a cheaper way of doing this? Could you just play it through loudspeakers? But I think you would certainly struggle to hear, and if the weather was bad, you wouldn't want to have your windows open to do that. So I think it's sensible to have the radio, and there's a real opportunity there again of further mission as others in the local area can tune in to your radio station. It was an opportunity to come together for communion, and I know for many, communion is at the heart of discipleship, and also it's a divine means of grace. It can be a place of conversion, so an opportunity for mission. So it was a communion service and also a covenant service, an opportunity to come together. So although we were separated by our cars, it certainly felt like a shared experience. There was this sense of unity amongst everyone and the other cars. And also just a wonderful time to remember again, remembrance, an act that none of us had done for a long time. It really felt in your car moment of personal devotion, but whilst in fellowship and communion with one another. And it was a really enjoyable experience. Everyone seemed to enjoy it. I focused on this photo of a dog hanging out the window, but there was lots of children hanging out of windows as well, as they enjoyed watching the band and seeing what was going on. Families loved seeing the other cars. And everybody got very excited, as you heard in the video, when we all beeped our horns to show that we were agreeing amen in our prayers, which was really good fun. And it was amazing that we could sing in real time around real people, and we certainly took that opportunity. There were 6 worship songs or hymns in the service. You had to run through radio, so for quite a few cars, they kept their engines on. Others didn't. That affected only one car, but they needed to be jump started at the end of the service. But we were able to do that. And then at the very end of the service, every car had a delivery of their pre-ordered drink and snack, which was really nice. It encouraged everyone, I think, to stay a little bit longer, not just come in and go out again, but to stay and dwell. But of course, we couldn't chat amongst the cars, but it felt personal and in fellowship. We've certainly learned from it as a college and the Peak Circuit. The superintendent at the Peak Circuit thought it was very worthwhile and to do it again. And as a college, we're committed to thinking about doing something nearer to Christmas time, and perhaps to be more intentional about inviting people in. It provided a church service with a wide range of the senses. It was nice to be able to see people around us in real life, not in little screens on Zoom. We could hear music and join in with the singing whilst in company and safely. We could taste the sacraments, not so much the wafer, but certainly the very sweet wine. And we could smell the coffee that was delivered to us. I was talking with Ash and reflecting with him about it, and as a college we enjoyed collaborating and supporting the local churches of the Peak, as well as pushing the boundaries of mission. And he brought up a quote, a statement made by Pope Francis in a recent conversation: "The hallmarks of a follower of Jesus during a pandemic are creativity and prophecy." And we were saying how correct that is. In times of crisis, whether our own personal crisis or worldwide ones, such as the pandemic we are currently facing, it's tough to look beyond the here and now. Our concerns and worries very often prevent us from seeing beyond the struggles of today. And it can be hard to imagine the future or even tomorrow, when a future beyond this one seems so uncertain and when the present needs our full attention, focus and energy. So in the light of the challenge by Pope Francis, we need to become a community that is creative and prophetic. It is too easy and a failure of God's call upon us to simply rest in what was, or long for what was, or work to keep things fixed in the past. God is calling us out, pushing us forward, driving us into the future as a creative and prophetic community of disciples. So our prayer is that we embrace the creative and dare to be the prophetic voice that the church and world needs at this time. There was a very short Bible reading in the service from Hebrews chapter 12 verses 1 to 3, and one sentence has really struck me from it, which is, "And let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of faith." And I just wonder, as we move in, Rachel will come up, but to think about, what are your initial thoughts? What struck you positively, and also what challenge did it present to you? Could you do something like this? Who could you collaborate with? I think it needs collaboration. And what else is needed to make disciples and provide discipleship? If church events are socially distanced, as church, I think I noticed that we might have found ways to support one another, but how could we extend this to those not already a part of the church?
Thank you so much, Tom. That was so inspiring to hear, and it looked like a really great day. The weather held out for you as well, which is always good. We are going to go into breakout rooms now for 15 minutes, and Tom's just very helpfully gone through the questions. I'm just going to ask each of our facilitators if they'd like to share one thing that their group had found helpful, or that they've been talking about. But also for anybody else, if you'd like to use the chat facility at the bottom of your screen, then please do write in anything that you would like to say, or any questions that you might have, then please use that facility. I'm going to come to Elizabeth first, if that's okay. Is there something that you'd thought of in your group, Elizabeth?
Everybody loved the idea, the creativity behind it, and the fact that cooperating with people, not just one group, wider cooperation, but they were challenged to think wider themselves, not just about their own sort of church bit, but try and see how it fits in with community.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Elizabeth. Lorraine, what was your group saying?
Yes, the initial response was it was inspirational, and straight away people were saying, where could we do this, or how could we do this? So they were quite inspired by it and felt that it seemed a lot of fun. They liked very much the idea of outreaching beyond your enclosed community by having a radio, but the conversation still had some concerns that whatever we do, we exclude people. So to always be aware of the concerns over people who don't have technology or cars to get there, but didn't see that as a reason not to do it, just aware that there's always an exclusion.
Great, thank you, Lorraine. Andrew, what about your group?
Okay, yeah, we felt it was a positive thing. We talked about having an opportunity at the moment to do things differently, having been out of our buildings for a period of time, and to be creative, to take church outside, maybe to where people are. We heard a story about somebody that had been driving a Land Rover with lots of harvest things on through the villages in the Peak District this last weekend, and just, raising awareness of things. We also talked a bit, just going to share this about discipleship, because we talked about the fact that discipleship doesn't necessarily need to be a primary focus if you're doing an event like this. And there was a lovely quote that Rob Cotton shared with us, that sometimes these events are to provoke a blip on people's spiritual radar. That's success. So a blip on people's spiritual radar is success. If we've just, touched people in some way, that's a success.
Yeah,
okay, thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Carla, what about your group?
And our group was really excited by this prospect of getting outside the building, recognising that for some their buildings have remained locked, but a recognition that actually Christians aren't locked inside those buildings. We're out and about in community, and really good to be able to make worship available to people in a creative way.
Great, thank you, Carla. Graham's just saying we're not all here, but I'm wondering whether people have just got their videos hidden, that we have all come back from the breakout rooms, but videos are switched off and people are muted. I'm hoping everybody's here. I'm not sure what we can do. What about your group, Graham?
Yeah, well, there was lots of positive feedback, lots of energy and enthusiasm for it. People thought it was a brilliant idea. And I think the one thing we would bring back is how much people appear to value being together. So the value in trying to enable people to be together in whatever way that is feasible. So for whatever, however good Zoom might be, it can't replace the feeling of being together, even if you're being together in separate cars. At least you're in the same physical space. And I think, and along with that, I think, inspired by the creativity and the imagination and the courage and the risk taking, which we thought could be applied to other ideas, so it's not just about, there are contexts where you couldn't put on a similar event, but you could apply creativity, imagination, courage and risk to Brilliant. A different event.
Thank you, Graham. And I think I would share from our group, again, the enthusiasm and the excitement, really, the inspiration to try and think outside the box and do something different. But also that thought that actually for us in our local rural communities, trying to do something ecumenical, we talk quite a bit about collaboration and partnership and where would we find those partners. So as opposed to, necessarily having an educational college or something with, you might be having conversations with ecumenical partners and seeing what could be done across a few villages or even across circuits. We were also mindful, I think, of we had the conversation around the environment and making sure that we were doing everything we possibly could to make sure we weren't jeopardising all the good work that we're doing around climate change and that kind of stuff.
It's our pleasure to welcome Kate Burnett now. Kate is a managing trustee and the renovation project coordinator for Edale Methodist Chapel. She arrived in Edale some 24 years ago with her partner and 3-month-old daughter, and has intermittently attended both the Anglican and the Methodist local churches. But about 5 years ago, she replied to a questionnaire about the possible future of the chapel. And in discussions with Deacon Lorraine Brown and chapel members, a plan for renewing the chapel's mission through its renovation was drawn up. She's reaffirmed her childhood Methodism and found much joy in the increased community that she's discovered around this project. Kate trained and practiced as a theatre designer. She taught theatre design at Nottingham Trent University and has curated several national exhibitions of design for performance. Kate, it's really good to hear a little bit about your story. It's really good that you've come to share some of your experience of rural ministry. So welcome, and we look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Thank you much. Thank you very much. Are you going to put that's it, brilliant. Okay. Hello everybody. Thank you very much for inviting me here today. And thank you so much to Lorraine and to the Peak Circuit team for all the support that we're enjoying in this project. So first of all, I've just got a little list of questions down the side of this map. And the first one is Edale Chapel on the map? And of course it isn't. We've had to put it there. And we've now put it on Google Maps as well. You can see where it is. It's surrounded by hills. There is a railway line going through it, going through the valley, but otherwise it is actually quite a sort of remote valley in a sense. I'm going to ask the questions as I go along, so I'm going to try and be quick getting through where we are because some of you know about this. So, Katrin, could you do the next slide, please? Thank you. So this is the chapel. This is what it looked like in 1900. It was actually built in 1811. And I don't think it changed very much in the first 100 years. They added a little bell tower, one bell, to call the children probably. And they added a schoolroom in 1910, which is the little bit on the side. And it looks pretty well like that now. 2018, this picture was taken. There was a very big tree at the front, which was casting the shadow, and that is now gone. But why is it in this place? It's there because it's on the drovers' trails going across the Pennines that took salt from Cheshire across to the east side, and wool and so on to the other side, and lots of other things as well, I'm sure. These trails were used by the peripatetic Methodist ministers establishing small villages on their way. And later on, the railway that came in 1890 something brought all the workers out from Manchester on trips, and in weeks they would come out and camp for the week and be riotous. Then there was a World War I camp there. And then the Kinder Trespass is famous for the walkers groups that sort of walked out here. So really, I suppose, the reason that the chapel is here is because it's had successions of journeying travellers and then of particular communities sort of in relatively short bursts. And it's now in a kind of quiet phase. Okay, next one, please. Thank you. So, who are its community? Well, they were these visitors, and for them it was a lung, if you like, somewhere to breathe in the fresh air. It was also a farmer's church, and a lot of the names buried in the churchyard, not a very big churchyard, go back for hundreds of years, farmers' names. Its community now is a real mixture of professional people who commute in and out of Sheffield and Manchester, but also local people and people who work in the hospitals, also in Sheffield particularly, and then also local workers still, farm workers, social services, etc. What makes it relevant? Well, it's a quiet, a peaceful place. It's quite isolated. It has a sense of peace to it, and people love to come and just spend a little bit of time there. We also we're very lucky in having some wonderful musicians in the valley. Music is very important here, and of course it's important to Methodism. And Bella Hardy, the folk singer, runs music workshops, some of which are at the chapel. We have local carols, the tradition of local carols in the Hope Valley, and we've tried to have services there. So services, we only have services up until the last 2 years, every 2 months, so 6 a year. Last year, we determined to make them once a month at least. And so now we have them on the last Sunday of every month. So please do come to those. But our aim for this project is that it's not just services, it's that this place is in use, hopefully every day, as a quiet place, but also with different activities. So are services and congregation necessary? Well, I suppose I would come back to that with further questions as to what do you mean by service and what do you mean by congregation? Okay, next one, please. So this is what it is like now. This is the state of the church. This is the back of it. And you can see it looks sad and sorry for itself. It actually now has a new roof since this photograph. The ground has been excavated to make an entrance into the little off-shop building on the left-hand side. And it is work in progress. But basically it has no heating. It has fallen into disrepair. There was no use of this space at the back and no access to this funny little offshot, which has a whole very odd history of its own. Next one, please. Thank you. And this is the inside. Downstairs is a sort of Edwardian sort of woodwork. It has a false ceiling that was put across when the boiler blew up to keep the heat in that part. And upstairs, the gallery was closed off. And these we think are the original pews. They certainly have an 18th century new room Bristol. They look exactly like those pews. And there are candle holders on them and so on. The aim is to restore this and open it up so that we will have the possibility of 100 or so congregation or audiences for concerts and so on. So, but that's the state of it now. Let's move on, please. Thank you. Okay, so how can the chapel contribute more to its community? Well, in order for it to communicate, to contribute more, to serve it more, we need to do all these different things. And we started applying for grants in 1918, I think. So we've just been applying for grants 2 years now. We divided the work into 2 phases so that we could make the outside secure and we could do the exploratory excavations and so on without hampering our ability to keep applying for funds, because so many of them say you mustn't have started the work yet. So that was a sort of a very useful thing to do. I won't go through all the things that we need to do, but I will come on to, we're still doing some of the phase 1 things, but I will come on to phase 2 and say that if we get the last little bit of funding, then we can do these things, and this will make the building somewhere that people want to spend time. At the moment, it's a bit of an ordeal to be in there for more than an hour. So the toilet, the kitchen, wiring, installing heating, opening the gallery, starting our social project, our garden project, equipping this little study archive we've crammed in above the new toilet, and creating and maintaining an efficient website so that we can invite people to be a part of this project, to share their experiences of time with us and in the landscape around us, and to know what they can join in with. Thank you. Could we move on, please? Thank you. Okay, so we've raised the 159,000 of our new total of 176,000. We're waiting for a couple of grants news to come in. We suspect it might rise above that, and we're trying to build in a bit of movement to the amount of money that we need. These are all the funders that we've managed to go to and who've given us funding. I think we've got a 90% success rate at the moment, thank heavens. But in particular, I'd like to say that it's actually been individuals who've been excited by the project, who've felt that they could be a part of it by giving time, by giving money, by giving their skills. And that is building, if you like, our future community. I won't say congregation, because I know that not all of them will come to regular services as such, but they wish to be a part of it. Can we go on to the next one, please? Okay, last slide. So really answering some of those questions that I sort of set myself at the beginning, we're responding to the particularities of this place, of this community and this building. And I think that's really important, that you start with what you have. This is what we have. Our inspiration is in the journeying that founded the chapel. It's in the music that's core to our valley and to Methodism, and of course to spiritual uplift, which is why it's part of Methodism. And we believe in God in the midst of life and death, in the workplace, in the city, in the countryside, and therefore in community, which I've come to learn is a very Methodist approach, that we don't just do God on Sundays, that actually God is with us always through this project and beyond. So what is community and how is it evidenced? Well, it's in place, and it's in how we are and how we make our places. We need, as communities, we need landmarks, we need anchors, wayfinders, comfort, refuge, and we need places to be witness and memorial to the fact that we were ever here in the first place. So as a theatre designer, place is absolutely core to what I believe in and what I do. And place is nothing without the community in it and around it. They don't have to necessarily come on Sundays, but they have to have a belief in the strength of purpose of that place and of the community they're a part of, and of being a bigger part of something bigger. So COVID has changed this landscape as well in particular. For us, it's highlighted what home and what outside are. So many more people are coming to Edale, which at times is quite difficult, and we really need to learn to deal with that and to work with it well. It's changed the nature of the idea of staying in and of going out and of journeying. We have to think about where we're going to, why we're going, why we might be staying in, what can we do with staying in or going out. And I think it's also changed our needs for each other. We've just been talking about how we gather on Zoom or in our cars or distanced in person, or just speaking to each other over the walls of this landscape. How it's changed our needs for place, the places that we choose to go to be in, that we think about, that we long for, and our communities, how we think about each other, remember who we need to be in touch with, how we bring people into community, and how we share this with our faith, as at the same time knowing that Jesus is on the journey with us always. Thank you. So that brings me back very neatly to what Graham was saying right at the very beginning. So thank you,
Kate. It's just such an exciting story and a wonderful, wonderful one to hear. I've had a lot to do with the peak over the last few years, and it's just such a good news story to hear how Edale is kind of growing and coming on, and also a wonderful reminder about, you know, what it is to be Methodist. That was very inspirational. Can I get us all back to share our videos again and to get ready for going into breakout rooms? Excellent. Thank you for engaging with those breakout rooms. I thought they were excellent questions from Kate there. We had some great conversations. So I shall just invite our facilitators to share something from their groups. And I'll come to Elizabeth first again, if that's okay.
That's fine. We were thinking back to the communities that founded our churches and the perseverance and vision that they must have had, and how we need that today. And we also talked about this sense of place being quite strong. And I'm going to put on the chat a resource that we have at the Arthur Rank Centre that helps you think about your building and the story it might have to tell.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Fantastic. Lorraine.
Yeah, we had a great conversation. It started with a story about a church that's been running a coffee morning for 20 odd years, and how that they're very much part of the community, and actually they are the community. And in response to COVID, opened their toddler group before they opened any services or anything like that, because of their community awareness. And we just started talking about, well, what is our community? And is it only about location? And actually we might have people who are a transient community that see themselves as identifying with the place we're visiting or the church we're visiting. And we could have gone on for ages asking questions, but not really coming up with any answers.
Thank you, Lorraine. That might be a conversation for another time then. Andrew.
Okay, we talked about being on the map is about having a role in the community, having something to offer to that community. We talked about the challenge of having chapels in really busy tourist hotspots, and the the challenge of responding to all those people who are visiting, but also having a local community that might support some of that work. Sometimes that's a very small local community. And I just want to say, we also mentioned about the need to recognise we are often ecumenical in these things, and it's not just about being a Methodist presence in that community, it's about being a Christian presence in that community.
Thank you, that's great. Carla?
Yeah, we had a really good conversation as well, and we kind of focused on how new situations, even though they might feel quite negative, such as COVID, but how new situations bring new opportunities, and we began to look at what we can do rather than what we can't do, and how examples were given of how churches have adapted to meet the needs of community whilst ensuring that they're abiding to all COVID restriction rules.
Great, thank you, Carla. And Graham?
Yeah, well, we were honoured to have Kate in our breakout room. So I think we were inspired really with a very holistic approach to church, that the breaking down of any sort of sacred secular divide, the focus on community rather than congregation, and seeing the building as a gathering point, as a resource to be used in meeting the needs of the community primarily, rather than any needs of the church.
Thank you, fantastic. And we similarly had a really interesting conversation, especially thinking about how some of our rural chapels are very small, but how this should not be just a reason for closure. And we had quite a conversation about sometimes there feels like there's pressure to do more, be more, but actually where we are serving our communities and we are outward facing, and especially through COVID where we've been meeting needs and bringing community together, what a vital lifeline that is for so many people. I think we were very inspired as well by this idea of witness and a memorial to who we are and what we are. So we'll look with interest at that resource from Elizabeth there that she shared on chat. Thank you all for participating in those, and please do continue to put any ideas in the chat. I'm going to pass over to Lorraine now just to close us this afternoon, but thank you to Kate and to Tom for your sharing with us today.
Rachel. And just to say thank you to everybody for joining us today and joining in. Thank you to the organising team for the work that they've done to make it happen, and especially to Catherine. She's the lady that does our Zoom-tastic side of things. So thank you, Catherine, for keeping us going. Big thank you to Tom and to Kate for the time that you've given, not just today, but in preparation as well, and for stimulating our brains. We're going to go away with stuff to think about. I hope you've all enjoyed being with us. If you have any topics that you would like covered in Positively Rural, or even a project that you're involved in that you think it would be interesting to share, then please let us know. Pop it into the chat before you go so we can pick up on those projects or topics. Our next Positively Rural gathering is going to be on the 11th of February, and we're delighted to say that the Revd Richard Teal will be speaking to us on mission communities in the light of COVID-19. So do join us for that. We very much look forward to seeing you again. Let's just pray before we go. So we pray to our God, the God of creation, to say thank you for today's opportunity to tell of creative ways to share your gospel, opportunities to tell our stories and to inspire each other. As we leave to go into the world, help us to see your creation with fresh eyes, to energize our creative ability and to prompt our actions so that we are ourselves prophets of your kingdom. And may we do that in all we do so that others may become disciples too. And the grace of the Lord Jesus Christ and the love of God and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with each one of us evermore. Amen.
Amen.